Hello and welcome to the Moxi Sew Along. I'm Sarah and I work with Greenstyle Creations and I blog at sewingwithsarah.com, and I'm excited to have you join me. The Moxi shorts are kind of my go-to athletic short for my summertime adventures. I've even used them for swimsuit. So I'm excited to sew them along with you this week. I'll be dividing the Moxi shorts up into 5 days and posting a new video each day. So make sure that you're subscribed to my blog and that you're following along on the Facebook pages of Greenstyle Creations and the Fabric Fairy in order to keep up with the happenings for the sew along. There will be some prizes at the end, so I'm just excited to get started. Today we're going to go through some fitting questions, what supplies that you're going to want to have on hand, and then we're going to actually go ahead and cut out our shorts. Now, if you haven't already ordered your pattern or your fabric, both Greenstyle Creations and the Fabric Fairy are offering a discount on the pattern and the fabric for these shorts. The Fabric Fairy carries a stretch woven that is really ideal for these shorts. It's what they were drafted for. I'll talk about using alternate fabrics in a minute, but she ships pretty quickly, so if you want to pop over and grab some fabric, you're welcome to do that. But you can use any appropriate fabric in your stash for this sew along. So if you've already got something that works and you can't afford new fabric, don't feel like you can't join us. So I'm going to go ahead and talk first about the supplies that you're going to need. First off, other than the pattern and the fabric, you're going to want to make sure to have a few things on hand. I mainly use my serger and my sewing machine when I'm sewing these shorts. If you're using your sewing machine, you're going to want to have a stretch needle in there. I use like a 7511 stretch needle for sewing the stretch woven. And that needle would work for a knit as well. So I'm going to make sure to have a stretch needle. If you're not using a serger, you're going to just want to make sure that you finish your edges if you're using the stretch woven fabric, as you go along. If you're planning on adding the optional zippered pocket in the back, you're going to want to have about a 5-inch zipper. It's okay if it's a little bit longer than that. They're pretty easy to shorten. This is just kind of a regular close-ended zip. So you're going to make sure to have that on hand. Some lightweight interfacing is a good thing to have on hand. For that zipper, I use a rotary cutter in all of my cutting, and then scissors are going to come in handy too. You're also going to want to have something to do your bias tape with. You can do your bias tape by hand, just kind of folding it in the middle and then folding it in again, but it is faster and easier and kind of saves your fingers from the heat a little bit if you have a bias tape maker. These are available on Amazon. I'll link them on my blog. Just a 1/2-inch bias tape maker is what you're going to want to look for. There are some fancy bias tape machines, and if you have one of those, you can certainly use it. But the little, handheld, I'll show you, bias tape maker, they look like this. The 1/2-inch size isn't in here, but this is kind of what they look like. It's going to be really handy. Of course, your usual assortment of pattern weights and clips or pins, whatever you want to use, is going to be handy. And then you're going to need some elastic. You're going to want some clear elastic for sewing in the waistband. I like to use 1/4-inch clear elastic. You could use 3/8-inch clear elastic. It really doesn't matter. That's really going to make a huge difference in how these shorts wear, especially for athletic purposes. You're also going to want to have some knit elastic if you're planning on sewing the inner briefs or thong that go inside the shorts. You can sew them without the briefs or the thong inside, but if you're going to want to add that feature, then make sure that you have a 1/4-inch or 3/8-inch knit elastic. Okay, and then if you're sewing the compression shorts, you'll just need some fabric for that. So these take about 3/4 to 1 yard of main fabric, and then you're going to want to have about 3/4 to a yard of fabric for the waistband and the inner briefs as well. Make sure, now sometimes what you may want to do is order 2 main fabrics, one to use for your bias tape and the other to use for the main part of the shorts, so you can have a contrasting bias tape on there, and then you can switch. You can sew a second pair using the scraps from the main fabric from your first pair, and then from the that you use for the bias tape on your first pair for the main fabric on your second. So that's another thing that you definitely can do. The main fabric needs to have about 20% stretch. So the stretch woven from the fabric fairy that these were designed for has 20% stretch. So 4 inches of fabric in your hands is going to stretch to 5 inches. That's what 20% stretch means. If you're using a knit fabric instead of a stretch woven fabric, you can make these, and I've done it several times and been very happy with the results. You can definitely make these with a knit. Just make sure that you kind of take a look at the sizing, because if you're using a knit instead of the woven, the knit's usually going to have more than 20% stretch, and generally you're going to want to size down about 1 size. So keep that in mind if you're using a knit instead. I would not personally recommend store-bought bias tape as a supply, and that's because it's just kind of stiff. It doesn't lay around the curves. These shorts kind of curve up around the bum. It doesn't kind of give a lot of nice, it doesn't lay really nicely. If this is the first time that you're ever making bias tape, I'm going to walk you through that and help you through that process. And it's a really great skill to have on hand. It's a skill that you would use if you've made the Havana dress, or if you want to make the Havana dress. It's a skill you're going to use there. It's just really useful in a lot of contexts. So I would highly recommend taking this opportunity to explore it. If you haven't gotten comfortable with bias tape, this is a great time to do that. The fabric for the compression shorts, or for the waistband, or for the inner briefs needs to have at least 50% stretch. So that's going to be a knit. You're not going to make the briefs out of the stretch woven no matter what. So you're going to definitely use a knit for that. Something lightweight generally, especially for the briefs or the compression shorts, because you don't want to, have a really big bulky layer in there. You're going to want some matching thread, of course. And then an optional supply, you're going to need a ruler of some sort. But I have this handy kind of bias tape ruler, and it has this angled edge and then some measurements on here. And I just find this really helps me get some nice even cuts of bias tape. So you're going to want to have that on hand as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the pattern and talk to you a little bit about fit in my next kind of part of today's video. So I'll see you back here in just a minute for that. I wanted to take a minute to talk to you about fitting adjustments, because anytime you're sewing a woven pair of shorts or a low stretch pair of shorts, it's not going to be the same as sewing a pair of leggings. So that you're going to want to be doing some fitting. And on the pattern, page 19 has some really helpful tips for adjusting for some different fitting issues. So I'm just going to kind of show you this really quickly. It's on page 19, and it's going to be a really good reference for you. And this is what I used. I've definitely made some fitting changes to mine, and I'm going to actually show you kind of on me what my shorts look like and the fitting adjustments I made and why I made them. But I wanted to show you this page first because I find it really helpful. So I'm going to put my phone back in the tripod, and then I'm going to show you what I do for my fitting changes and what you might want to look for as well. So I'm standing on a stool here in my sewing room, and I wanted to show you a little bit about what you might look for fitting changes, because it's one thing to look at a screen and say, oh, maybe that's the wrinkle that's going on, I'm not sure, and it's another thing to kind of look at it on a body. We have a blog post on the Greenstyle blog that was written by Natalie, who documented some of her fitting changes on the Moxis. I would highly encourage you to check that out on the Greenstyle blog, and I'll link it in my blog as well, post for today. But I'm going to also show you some additional things. Now, one other thing that I forgot to mention earlier is if you want to just make the shorts longer, you're not worried about the fit necessarily, you're just more comfortable with a longer short, there is a separate blog post on that that was written by someone else, and I will definitely link that as well. I'm not going to go through the process of doing a video for it because I actually really like the length of the shorts. But if you have any questions, let me know. I do understand how to do it, and if not, we can always tag her if there's a question. So anyway, so I'm going to go through and show you some of the fitting things that you might be looking for. So the first one has to do with the back side. So if you know that you have kind of a rounder bottom, you might, I'll kind of turn around here, you might notice some lines kind of coming out. You might feel like if the back rise is too short, you might feel like your butt is kind of eating the shorts. so I apologize for all these great views of me, but so you could look at the back, see if there's kind of lines that might indicate that, stress lines that might indicate there's not enough room in the bottom, or that you might need a little extra length in the back rise. Now for the front, same thing, I lengthen my front rise because I don't want to get, you know, kind of camel toe look going on. Okay, so I did lengthen the front rise because I kind of felt like it was the crotch depth, or I'm sorry, the front, you know, crotch depth, because I felt like it was too short. I also noticed in my original pair that I had lines, kind of whiskers, that were going this way, and that indicated that I needed more room in the hips. Now if you look at these kind of closely, you can see I kind of still could use a little bit of extra room there. I'm okay with that for these, but I might add a little bit of extra room on my next pair. So, you know, that's something you might be looking for as well. If you have whiskers that radiate out from your hips, you might need to take a look and maybe make some changes to, you know, the hip area. So, I mean, basically those are kind of, oh, a flat backside. I didn't mention that. If you tend to have kind of more of a flat bottom, you might notice that there's extra fabric under your butt. And so there's a fitting adjustment that shows on page 21 of the, or 19 of the pattern, how to adjust for that. So you can definitely check out, there are lots of blogs, lots of things out there that talk about pants fitting, and all of those I think actually are informative, but because of the way that the Moxi shorts are constructed and because of the kind of unique pattern pieces, I would really make kind of the pattern your go-to guide first, and trying to work on those. You may also find that you need a slightly different crotch curve. Some people want to kind of scoop out their crotch curve a bit in the front or the back, and find that that works for them as well. Kind of the rule of thumb when you're looking at making fitting changes is just to make small changes at a time. So start out by making a muslin and seeing, you know, kind of diagnosing the fit. Make sure that it's in a similar fabric to your final fabric. If you make a muslin in, you know, some cheap, you know, polyester knit, and then you're using a nice stretch woven for your final, you're not going to get the same fit. You're not going to get the same, you know, kind of changes that might need to be made. So take that into account. I know we don't want to waste our really nice fabric, but if you can find something similar with similar structure, similar stretch, you're going to be more successful in the end. And then just have, you know, be patient, have fun with it. Expect that, you know, hopefully you're going to end up with a wearable muslin, but that your first pair might not end up being, you know, your best fitting pair, that there are always going to be refinements that you can make. And I think that that's kind of the fun of sewing. Once you get some of those techniques down, some of the fun is in kind of perfecting that fit. And I'm, you know, I mean, there are things that I can still see and say, hey, I might change this about my Moxis, but I really love the fit. I have the Lululemon shorts, and I feel like they fit me, honestly, kind of super similarly to that. So I really love the fit of the Moxis. I did lengthen the front rise. I added a bit to the hips. I may, you know, at some point go back and scoop out the back rise just a little bit. So, you know, all those are things that you can consider and kind of play around with. And I think that the great thing about a sew along is that, you know, you have my attention, you have Angie's attention if we need it. And so, you know, you can post a fit picture and we can kind of help puzzle through some of those things. I'm not an expert, but I've done a bit of fitting on my own body, and there are a lot of people with a lot of knowledge kind of out there in Facebook land. So, you know, let's see what we come up with and have fun along the way. Please hang in there today. Next, I'm going to go through actually cutting out the fabric. So today we are cutting our fabric as well. If you don't know how to assemble a Greenstyle pattern, there is a post on their blog that I will link in my blog post for day one that I wrote that actually goes through how to download and print your first Greenstyle pattern. So that'll walk you through that. I'm gonna skip over to the part where you're just actually cutting out your fabric. So let's get to that because that's the fun part. So I'll see you in a minute. So once you've got your fitting changes all worked out, or at least some first trial suggestions, you're going to want to get out your main fabric. I'm going to be using the stretch woven from the Fabric Fairy. You want to make sure that you lay out your fabric so that the stretch is going this direction. So I've got my selvage up at the top, my stretch is running this way, and I'm ready to go. So that's true whether you're using a stretch woven or a knit. You're going to need to cut 3 pieces for the main outer part of the shorts. You're going to cut 2 mirror images of the lower back, 2 mirror images of the front, and 2 mirror images, or I'm sorry, 1 on the fold of the upper back. Now I've made some notes for myself about what kind of fitting changes I'm doing, so I'm going to kind of do those on the fly. Eventually I'll trace out my pattern with those modifications, but for now I'm just going to use what I've got. So if you see those notes on there and you wonder what's going on, that's what's happening. Now I've measured my fabric to make sure that I folded it's folded over on itself, and made sure that I've done that evenly. And so the stretch is going this way. So I'm ready to cut out some of my pieces. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. I just changed the blade of my rotary cutter and it's cutting so beautifully. I always wonder why I haven't done that sooner. So the hips of the front was one place where I was kind of curving out, and then I was going to add a little bit of height, tapering up at a little bit of height to my front rise. And that's just kind of what I know about this pattern based on what I've found from testing it and wearing my shorts, about kind of my preferred fit. So I know it's a little bit out of your view, but I'm going to cut the upper back on the fold now. And again, I'm curving out just a little bit on the upper back piece. So those are my 3 main pieces. So I've got those all cut out. Now I'm ready to grab my knit fabric. If you're already using a knit, you could use a contrast fabric for the waistband, or you could stick with, what you're using for the main fabric for your waistband pieces. If you're also doing the compression shorts or the briefs or the thong, then I'll show you, what pieces you're going to need to cut for those. Those would also be out of a high stretch knit. So I'm going to bring up my knit fabric over to my cutting table, and I'll show you what pieces you need for that, for those different options. But keep in mind, you would choose either the briefs or the compression shorts or the thong, not all 3 together. You want to grab your knit fabric, and before we cut into that, I want to show you something that I did with the waistband. The waistband on the Moxi shorts is not as tall as the waistband on something like the Super G's or the high rise stride waistband. And I prefer a higher rise my waistband. The Moxi shorts, as they're drafted, hits me kind of a little bit below my belly button. Not too much more below it, but a bit below my belly button. And I just prefer a higher rise waistband. So what I did was, using the Super G waistband as a guide, I increased the height of all of my waistband pieces by 1 inch. So that's a pretty simple modification if you want to make it as well. I just basically, took my waistband piece, took some tracing paper, and then, marked 1 inch all the way across. It's just making sure that I maintained the same curve that was originally on there. So when you look at the original Moxi Shorts waistband pieces, and there are 4 of them, an inner front and an outer front, and an inner back and an outer back, you will see that mine are taller than you might expect. And that's just because of how I prefer my exercise shorts to sit. So I wanted to explain that before I got to cutting these. You can also, if you're going to be doing the zippered waistband pocket, you can still add the height if you wanted it there. you'll cut the pieces out the same though regardless. So if you want to add the zipper pocket but you don't want to increase the height of the waistband, that's no problem. You know, just go ahead and cut out your waistband pieces like normal. So I'm going to grab my fabric, and you want to make sure that you have it folded on grain. And I have a separate video that I'll link in my blog post. You want to make sure you're checking out the blog posts every day, because even if you're watching these videos on Facebook, I offer a lot of extra kind of tips and tricks that I've done in previous kind of videos, or things that I thought I should mention in the blog post. So I always encourage you to check that out. So this is my outer back waistband. So I'm going to cut one of those on the fold, and all of these are cut on the fold. So just going to cut one of those on the fold. Okay, now I have an inner back waistband. The inner back waistband is going to be a little bit shorter than the outer back waistband, so that it will roll nicely to the inside. Or I'm sorry, the inner back waist, yeah, the inner back waistband. So got that there. Cut that out. And then you're going to grab your front waistband pieces, your outer front and your inner front, and I'm going to cut those again on the fold. And it looks like I'm going to need to move my fabric over for a minute to get my inner front waistband. This is actually a scrap of fabric from a previous tank that I made, and I love using my scraps for waistbands, especially when they're fun and kind of colorful like this. I'm using a basic navy fabric for this pair, but by adding kind of a fun waistband, it just makes them more interesting. So cut the inner front, and then that's the last waistband piece that I'll need. Okay, so now if you're not going to be adding any of the inner compression shorts or the briefs or the thong, then you're kind of done with cutting. If you are going to be adding those, you can follow along with me in the next portion of this video. But if you're not adding them, then you're done, and you know, you're ready to kind of complete your task for today. Make sure you post a picture in the Facebook group of the fabric that you have cut out, so we can kind of see what our color choices are and pattern choices. I always like to see that. But if you are continuing along with me, I'll be back in just a second with some more video for you. If you're going to do the compression shorts add-on, I just wanted to show you really quickly the pieces that you would need for that. You're going to need the shorts front, the shorts side panel pocket, the shorts back, the optional gusset, and if you don't want to use the gusset, I cut on the back of the shorts, there's this cut here for the gusset. I always like to have a gusset in my athletic clothes. It just gives you a better range of movement, but it is optional. So there was another cut line that would have been kind of extended out here if you were not going to use the gusset. But if you are going to use the gusset, cut along that and then include the gusset. And then there's the side panel. So those are the pieces you're going to want to cut out if you are planning on doing the compression shorts. And I'm going to cut these. Now you want to make sure this is out of a knit. So this needs to be out of a pretty stretchy knit fabric. This is not, you can't make the compression shorts with like a stretch woven. So make sure that you found a good knit for that. And then this is also, you know, something you can use if you want to have your waistband match your compression shorts. You could do that. So you want to make sure that the stretch is going what will end up being around the body on the shorts. So I'm going to cut 2 mirror images of the front, and I have my fabric folded right sides together here. Now I always adjust, I know this about myself, I end up needing to shorten the front rise a bit. So I'm gonna cut a little bit at an angle here, and that's gonna shorten the front rise for me. So just kind of smoothed it in, and it's really, you can see, it's just a really tiny amount. It doesn't take much for me. And then I'm gonna cut out the side panel pocket as well over here. That has a dotted fold line on it. You can mark that if you want to. It looks like, I can measure it, but it looks to me like it's about an inch down, and that's exactly what it is. So the fold line is an inch down. So I'm just gonna kind of make a mental note of that. But I'm not gonna actually do anything there. And then I have enough room here to cut 2 of my crotch gussets that I am going to be using. And I highly recommend making your crotch gusset, just make sure that it's like a wicking, breathable type of fabric. This is an athletic yoga knit, so it's also fairly thin for a yoga knit. So it's going to, you know, breathe pretty well. You just don't want that crotch gusset to get super sweaty and not breathe well. We can talk about that kind of stuff during a sew along. It's a little awkward, but I never thought I'd be saying words like crotch gusset anywhere, but here we are. So got those pieces. Just gonna set them to the side and then cut out my others. There, sometimes I need to change the blade in my rotary cutter. It's obviously not quite cutting all the way through, but so if you need to change your blade, you should do that too. Okay, so I've got my front and my side panel pocket. Now I need to cut my back pieces, and I might kind of have to flip my pattern pieces around a bit in order to be able to fit, because this is a scrap of fabric from another project here. So I think that's probably what I'm going to need to do, and that's okay. I can do that. So I've got the back here. I do not personally shorten the back rise. So, you know, again, personal adjustments, getting to know your body, making a test pair, seeing how they fit you. That's all going to be really critical. I think that sometimes we get frustrated because we feel like, you know, why didn't that fit me right out of the envelope? Well, we all know that ready-to-wear clothing does not fit us right out of the envelope. So for the most part, patterns aren't going to either. So sometimes it just takes some adjusting to get the perfect fit for your body, and I think that's kind of what sewing's all about. Once you get past some of those techniques and you know your basic techniques, then really sewing becomes about figuring out how to fit your body and get things just the way that you like them. So I'm going to make sure to flip my pattern piece upside down because I did not cut that on the fold. Take advantage of this little spot here. Sometimes it's kind of fun to play pattern Tetris and see how much you can fit in, you know? That's kind of what's going on. I am not worrying about lining up these stripes. For one, they're going to be halfway under the shorts, so you're not even going to notice, but these are super tiny stripes. If you line up these kinds of stripes, more power to you, but I just, I do most of my sewing at night, and honestly, that's not something I usually care about at 2 a.m. So these are my back leg pieces for that optional add-on. Got those going on now. And then now all I have is this side panel. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that. Again, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to the stretch. So the stretch is going to be going this way, which is essentially across the body. And you'll notice that the angled, can't see that very well, the angled piece is labeled on the pattern. That's the top. So, you know, you don't have to label it on your pattern piece or anything, but it's just good to kind of make a mental note. Again, just kind of making the most of my little fabric scrapped here. I had hoped to get the waistband out of this as well, but honestly not sure that's going to happen. And the longer side of the back of this side panel connects to the back, and the shorter side connects to the front, because things need to come up higher in the back, right? So to cover our beauty. Okay, so I've got one of those. I need one more that's a mirror, so I'm gonna make sure, since I did not cut on the fold, that again I'm flipping my pattern piece over. It's always irritating to not have done that and wish that you had. So that's not totally straight. Because of the stripes on this fabric, I can tell exactly where the grain line is, or where it should be. Anyway, looks like I can fit it right there. I can't be the only one that always feels really good when they use up a scrap of fabric. Does anyone else feel really good about that? I don't like having random scraps just kind of floating around, so it's always nice. I feel like I really got the most out of a piece of fabric, especially when it's a print I like. The ones I don't like usually get donated to my kids' art projects. Okay, so now we've cut out all the pieces we need for the optional compression shorts add-on. I like to put a little clip around this gusset piece, because this thing, I lose gussets like crazy. So clip that together with the pattern piece. But other than that, that's it. Once you got that cut out, you got your front and back waistbands cut out that we did in the other portion of the video. The front inner, back inner, front outer, and back outer waistbands. Then you are ready to start sewing your shorts. So we will get right on that in our next video. Tomorrow we'll be sewing some of the side seams on our shorts, so I'll see you back for that. So the briefs are super simple. There are just two pieces for the briefs, and the thongs are very similar, so I'm not going to do a separate thong video. You're just going to cut one front on the fold and one back on the fold. So you want to make sure that you're thinking consciously about the type of fabric that you use for the briefs. Keep in mind, you want this to breathe well. You want it to, you know, just be comfortable to wear. You're also going to want to make sure that you have 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch elastic on hand for sewing the briefs. Those are going to be, you're going to need that for the leg openings. So you're just going to fold your fabric in half, place your pattern piece on the fold. It doesn't matter whether you start with the front or the back, but this is the back. And then just go ahead and cut them out. Okay. So there's the briefs back. And then I'm going to fold my fabric again and cut the briefs front. This is a really nice lightweight, it's actually a swim lining from the Fabric Fairy, but I actually find their swim lining to be really high quality, and I like making briefs out of it. So here we go. This is the front. Now it has this little kind of triangle up here. I tend to just cut that off, and then I'll make a little clip, or I'll make a little spot with a pen, let myself know where that center front is. That's the whole purpose of that notch because you're going to be lining it up with the center front of the shorts. So it's helpful to know where that is. Now you always want to make sure you don't snag something like a swim lining. Okay, so now we've got the briefs cut out. So regardless of which view you're doing, you should be all done now and ready to get started tomorrow on sewing your shorts together. So tomorrow we're going to be sewing the side seams of our shorts and getting ready for the bias tape. I purposefully did not show you how to cut your stretch woven or your bias tape today because that's going to be part of another video on day 3 that's going to walk you through the entire step of cutting your bias tape and folding it and sewing it on. So, you know, stay tuned for that. I did not overlook it, but I just thought it would be easier to do it all in one shot. If you feel confident and you've got your stretch woven out or you've got your main fabric out and you're wanting to cut your bias tape, go right ahead and do that. You definitely are welcome to do that, but I'm going to save that for the videos for day 3, just because I think that it's just easier to kind of cut it and sew it all in one shot. So I hope that you're following along. Make sure you're posting pictures. Make sure you also check out my blog for some other tutorials. At the top of my blog on the right hand side, I have some sewing tutorials up there, and my YouTube channel has some other links to other sew alongs that you might enjoy as well. So I will see you back here tomorrow.